Alright, today we're going to look at completing the square. So, title can be Completing the Square. Now, this is a method. Instead of factoring, you can solve quadratics using this method. And we're going to start out with something really easy, something that we should all know how to do. So, let me see. Example. And all it is x minus 3 quantity squared equals 7. So to solve this, all we have to do, here I'm going to copy it down right here, x minus 3 quantity squared equals 7. Since this whole thing is squared, we can square root both sides, just like if we had x all by itself. We could square root both sides. And that would leave us with x minus 3, because the square and the square root cancel out. So x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 7. Anytime we're doing the square roots to both sides, we have to do plus or minus. Can't forget that, that's very important. And then to finish up solving, you add 3 to both sides, and you'll have 3, or x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 7. Easy, huh? Pretty easy? Right. So this is what's going to be in the middle of all of our problems that we're doing. So if you know, let's try another one real quick. 2x minus 3 squared equals 7. Same idea again. We're just square rooting both sides to get rid of that squared. We're trying to get the x by itself. Square root both sides. We'll be left with 2x minus 3 because the square and the square root cancel out. Plus or minus square root of 7 again. Plus or minus, can't forget that. And to finish this up, you add 3 to both sides. 3 plus or minus square root of 7, and then also divide by 2. So we'll have x equaling 3 over 2 plus or minus square root of 7 over 2. So those are the answers for this problem, or for these two problems. This will be the middle steps. Something that I want to warn you guys about is, you can still see it. When you square root, don't forget the plus or minus part for the square roots. Don't forget. So every time you do a square root, you have to do plus or minus, because if I had positive square root, every time you do plus or minus, every time you do the square root, you got to do plus or minus. Okay. Oh, there's a glare on the screen. I feel like a cat. Doesn't matter. Alright. A dog. Something that I want to remind you about is standard form for a quadratic equation. And so let's look at that. Standard form. It's in red. Didn't mean to do that. So standard form for a quadratic equation, which is an equation with the highest degree being 2, so it would be like x squared plus 3x plus 7 or something. The highest degree would be 2. The standard form for that would be a x squared plus b x plus c equals 0. So we'll have the a term coming in front of the x squared. We'll have b coming in front of just the regular x, and c will be our constant term. This is standard form for an equation of a line. Actually, I can do orange for the example and This is yellow, you can't really see it too well, but whatever, man. So, standard form is this. We'll need to know this later. So I'll just remind you guys now. If you don't have your equation in standard form, you can get it into standard form and continue on with the problem. Let me move this up a little bit. So our next example will be actually how to complete the square. So and this will be in orange also. We'll start out with x squared minus 6x minus 3 equals 0. The first step when you are completing the square is to get it into standard form. Since this is already in standard form, we know that our a is 1, our b is negative 6, and our c is negative 3. What we can do is just write those down real quick. A equals 1, b equals negative 6, and c equals negative 3. Just because later on I'm going to need this bit of information. I need to know what b over 2a quantity squared is. This is a part for completing the square, and I'll show you later. So right now, since we already know what a, b, and c are, we don't really need c, but we know what b and a are. So we can write negative 6 over 2 times 1 quantity squared, which is negative 3 squared, which is the same thing as 9. So this term is 9, and we'll use that later. Can you guys see that? Yeah. Alright, so the next step after finding this term, a, b's, and c's, is to get the 3, or get your constant term on the other side of the equal sign. So we'll have constant on one side and everything else on the other. X squared minus 6x equals 3. And then from here, we want to take this term, this b over 2a quantity squared, which in this case ended up being 9. We want to add that to both sides of our equation. So that's what I'm going to do right here. And I'm going to do it in red. So plus 9, and that comes from here. Okay? So add that to both sides of the equation. X squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 9, 10, 11, 12. Alright? Now, this little trick allows us to factor this piece right here. Okay? Before, we may or may not have been able to factor that, but now this is definitely factorable. So let's factor this. Using a diamond problem, 9 on the top, negative 6 on the bottom. What times what equals 9? Added together equals negative 6. What about 3 and 3? Oh, negative 3 and negative 3. That'll work out. We can use a shortcut because we have a leading coefficient of 1. So x minus 3 times x minus 3 equals, okay, we factored this, so what we're left with is 12. We didn't do anything with that, so I'm going to copy it down. When we have the same thing multiplied by itself, we can write x minus 3 quantity squared equals 12. And then this is just the same as the problems that we did up here. Right? So we know how to do this. We know how to finish it up. Square root both sides. Square root. Square root. So we'll be left with x minus 3 equals plus or minus square root of 12. And then add 3 to both sides. X equals 3 plus or minus square root of 12. We can reduce the square root of 12. How can we reduce that? I'm going to do this on scratch paper. Square root of 12. Can you guys see this? Yes. Well, 12 is the same thing as 4 times 3. So the 2 can come out. Square root of 4 is 2, so I can pull that out. And leave the 3 in there. So this becomes 3 plus or minus 2 root 3. And these are our two solutions to this problem. One of them is x equals 3 plus 2 root 3. And the other one is 3 minus 2 root 3. Now the reason I have two answers is because of this plus or minus part. This minus is here. I just wrote them separately. And then this plus goes here, or comes from there. Alright, I'm going to color this orange. Now, something that we're going to be using later on is, instead of actually going and factoring, we'll use a shortcut. And I'm going to explain the shortcut right now. So, pretend that we got all the way up to this point. We know we can factor. But sometimes we're going to have a fraction there, and it's pretty difficult to factor with a fraction. It's weird. I don't even like thinking about it. I don't like thinking about it. So, what I'm going to do is tell you that I'm going to tell you the shortcut. I'm going to tell you right now. Instead of factoring, we can skip all the way down to this step. So we wouldn't have to do the diamond problem or this. From here, we can write x minus 3, getting this minus 3 from here. And actually, I'm going to highlight that in pink. This negative 3 and this negative 3 come from the same spot. What I'm saying is, instead of going and factoring, you can just say x, okay, it's a minus 3 here, so I'm just going to put minus 3 quantity squared equals 12 instead of factoring. If this doesn't make sense, it'll make more sense in the next example. I'm telling you the shortcut now so that we can do it later on. So our next example is here. T squared minus 4t plus 8 equals 0. And I'm going to write down the steps as I go along on this. So first step is to write down your A, B's, and C's after you get it into standard form. So actually the first step is to get into standard form. Standard, that means standard, not, it's not an STD. Never mind. A, B, and C. So our A is just the 1. So equals 1. B is negative 4. Remember to include the sign. So negative 4. And C in blue, you can't tell this is blue probably, maybe a little, is positive 8. So just 8. Alright, so get into standard form. Step 2 we just did. Find A, B, and C. A, B, C. The first 3 notes just happen to be A, B, do, re, I don't know. Step 3, find B over 2A quantity squared. Find that term. So B over 2A all squared. Just plug in from the A, B, and C that we found. And we'll have negative 4 over 2 times 1, because A is 1, all squared. Be sure you're putting in the signs when you find A, B, and C, because the signs are important. It's for the shortcut, so we don't have to factor crazy things. So this reduces to negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2 quantity squared, which is negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. You see that? Yeah. Alright, so find A, B, and C. Do that. And then the next thing we can do is t plus 8. Get the constant on the other side. So step 4, move constant over. So in this case, we'll subtract 8 from both sides to get t squared minus 4